North Korea, one of the most secretive and repressive regimes in the world. Every year, tens of thousands try to escape across the border into neighboring China.
He's
just told me that the North Korean guards have a shoot-to-kill policy. Those who do get across face more horrors on the other side. Treated as illegal immigrants, they are forced to live like ghosts, in hiding, on the run, easy prey for traffickers. Worst of all, they're in constant fear of their worst nightmare, being sent back. It's midnight in Jilin, northeastern China. We're heading towards the North Korean border, a militarized area. The man in front of me escaped from North Korea 15 years ago, and since then he's helped over 120 of his fellow countrymen cross the border into China. He's taking us to one of the places where they usually cross. For his safety, Kwan wouldn't allow us to film his face. We've been told that many North Koreans try to flee at night. It's -15. In front of us, the frozen Tumen River that marks the border. He's incredibly tense about this. We want to keep our time here to a minimum. What happens if the guards see you trying to cross the border? He told me the North Korean guards have a shoot-to-kill policy. If you don't stop, they'll shout at you and tell you to stop. If you don't, then they can shoot you. So if you're arranging to meet people and to pick people up, how do you organise the meet? Kwan says he smuggles mobile phones into North Korea so the escapees can call him to arrange a time and a place. If they make it across, he picks them up and takes them to a safe house in China. There's about 2 or 3 lights. Not sure quite what they are. They could well be North Korean army patrols. Our contact was worried that soldiers would think we were helping people escaping into China. Okay, there's some cars coming. We can see some cars up there. We've got to move. We've just seen some cars coming along the road. We're not sure what those cars are. They could be Chinese army patrol. So our contact has asked us to get in the car as quick as we can. The Chinese authorities regard anyone crossing the border unofficially as illegal immigrants and will round them up and send them back. The exodus began when famine struck in North Korea in the late 90s, killing over 2 million people. It's continued ever since. Many who flee into China come here, to the city of Yanji. We're on our way to meet 2 North Koreans who have very recently arrived. We've been asked not to film openly on the streets to avoid being noticed by the local people. In theory, foreign journalists are allowed to operate freely in China. Put the camera down. Okay. But some people reporting on this issue have been arrested and detained, and that puts North Korean contacts in danger. The 2 friends had crossed the border just a few weeks before. They were clearly still traumatized. They've asked us not to reveal their identity because they still have friends and relatives in North Korea. So how did you manage to escape from North Korea? They told me they'd been planning their escape for some time. They used the cover of the New Year's celebrations to make their escape. They hid in a factory very close to the border and waited for the border guards to pass before being able to cross. They were taken in by a Chinese family who put them in touch with an underground network that helps North Koreans on the run in China. One of the men told me that he'd tried to escape before, but North Korean guards had caught him and sent him to a prison camp where he was tortured. His hands were shackled and they put tree branches around his wrists, which cut off the circulation, and he was then beaten. In all, he spent a year there. He said he was lucky to escape with his life. When he was there, 5 or 6 people died because of a lack of food. The men must now live in hiding. They fear that they may get caught by the local police and repatriated. If they do, they fear for their lives. They feel that they may well be killed. Since the Olympics, the police have started to crack down and even offered a bounty to Chinese, £20 for any North Korean that you hand in, you inform, which is forcing them to live in hiding in any one of these houses across the city. Unable to work legally, most of the escapees end up living in slums on the edge of border towns like Yanji. At any moment, they could be turned in to the police. This imposing building right on the main road is the Tumen Detention Center. The first 6 months of last year, 8,000 North Koreans were processed through here before being sent back home to North Korea. Most prisons in China are hidden from view, but this one is incredibly visible. We arranged to meet a North Korean woman who had been through the detention center after being caught in China. She said she was held there with her husband and baby for 3 months before being sent back across the border. How were you transported from China back to North Korea? She told us she was shackled and driven back. She says that the men that transported her back to North Korea forced everyone to have a strip search. What happened when you arrived inside North Korea? She was then split up from her husband. He was sent to a political detention center and died after being tortured. After 6 days, she was allowed to return home with her child. Her baby died of malnutrition a few months later, and she fled to China once again. On our way back towards Yanji, we passed close to the border and decided to have a look in daylight. Those hills you can see over there, the patchwork of fields, is North Korea. The border is literally about 30 yards away. Alongside us was the frozen Tumen River. In winter, refugees can run across the ice. In summer, they wade across. We came to a spot where we could see into Busan, the 6th largest city in North Korea. This is one of the most secretive regimes in the world, and there are so few signs of life here. The silence is being broken by dog barks. There's no vehicles, probably not much fuel. It just looks incredibly bleak. All along the border, we could see North Korean military activity, just some of the 1.2 million strong army. This is one of the narrowest parts of the river, and it's one of the most heavily guarded spots. We've just been driving along here now for a few miles. We've seen North Korean patrols all along it. There's a dug-in position just here. There's some soldiers patrolling along there. We arranged to meet a man who helps North Koreans on the run in China. I asked him to show me the routes people take. He told us that some go north across the Gobi Desert to Mongolia. Others head southwest, illegally crossing the borders into Thailand, Laos and Cambodia. Their ultimate destination is always South Korea. The South Korean government welcomes refugees from the north. But the border between the two countries is one of the most heavily militarized frontiers in the world, making it impossible to travel the short distance from north to south. And it's just ridiculous. That route is a distance of over 3,000 miles, over rivers, mountains, using every method of transport and fighting against the security apparatus of a superpower. The network of routes has become known as the Asian Underground Railroad, and tens of thousands have travelled on it. How do you prepare North Koreans for the journey across China? He told me that he gives them tickets and money raised from donations in South Korea. He said that some are also given crushed chili pepper to throw in the eyes of security guards who try to stop them. But more worryingly is this knife, which isn't used to harm other people. He says it's used by North Koreans to kill themselves, either by slitting their wrists or by stabbing themselves in the stomach, because they just know that if they are sent back, they could face execution. Of the 300,000 that are thought to have escaped, only 5% have made it to South Korea. The rest have no status in China and must stay invisible to survive. We heard that some women are trafficked into the sex industry and end up working in big cities like Yanji and Shenyang. One street has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars. There are 8 on this one street, KTV bars. They're karaoke bars that also double as locations for prostitution. We wanted to find out if the reports of North Korean women being forced into prostitution were true. Posing as foreign tourists, we went to film undercover in 3 bars where we'd heard they might be working. In a private hostess room, one manager explained his business. He said that North Korean women cost more than Chinese because there were fewer of them. He told me he doesn't pay the women straight away because he's afraid they may run off. So he pays them in installments to keep them hanging on, forcing them to work. When we asked if we could meet a North Korean woman, he said there were none there at the moment. They'd been arrested in a recent crackdown and sent back. The remaining few were tightly controlled by pimps. We'd heard reports of women who'd been trafficked across the border and sold as wives to Chinese villages, living deep in the countryside. When did you find out that you were going to be sold as a wife? Chan Suk said she was tricked by a broker in North Korea who told her that if she came to China, she would make a lot of money. But after 2 days, she was sold by the broker to a Chinese villager. What's amazing that he's saying this in front of his wife, that he found his wife through a friend who put him in touch with a broker. He only had 2,000 kwai, so he's saying that's all I could afford, so this is the only woman that I could get. Chan Suk said that her husband doesn't treat her badly, and she feels she is one of the lucky ones. Many of the women she knew had been sold were beaten and abused by their Chinese husbands.
아줌마를 때리고.
Despite being trafficked across the border and sold as a wife, she feels that her life here is the lesser of two evils because life in North Korea is just so harsh. Even if they are married to Chinese men, women like Chan-suk have no rights under Chinese law. We've come to a small village, a few miles away from the border, to meet with a 9-year-old boy, the son of a North Korean woman, to find out how the next generation are getting on. Now. We'd been told that the children of illegal North Koreans also face problems in China. But when we arrived, it became clear that the boy's situation was far worse than we first thought. So what has happened to the boy's mother?
엄마는 붙여박았어. 조선으로. 강제 6년 전에 갔지.
He says that the boy's mother was sent back to North Korea 6 years ago, and since then, he has been looking after the boy.
근데 아는 엄마 붙들어가면
He told me that because the boy's mother was North Korean, he had to spend his whole year's salary to buy the boy Chinese identity documents, without which you don't technically exist. He explained that he too had been married to a North Korean woman and had been unable to get identity papers for their daughter. And so, when she contracted cancer, she couldn't go to hospital and get free medical care. And she died. No one knows how many North Korean women are sent back from China each year. But it's estimated that 25,000 children have been left here in limbo. We've come to a Christian church in Jilin. Many of the Chinese in the northeastern provinces are ethnic Koreans who have lived here for generations. The priest is very tense about us being here. We're not allowed to film openly, we're not allowed to film the exteriors of the church to give away the location. Their shared sense of identity has led some ethnic Koreans to help refugees arriving from across the border. But it's extremely dangerous.
그리고 교회도 그들을 도와주면 이 법을 어기니까 제재를 받고 그래요.
The Chinese authorities forbid anyone from helping North Koreans. The pastor knows that if he's caught, his church will be shut down and he could end up in prison. So what kind of help do you offer the North Koreans who come to your church?
뭐 차비나 주고 차비나 대드리고 옷도.
The pastor said all he could offer them was food, clothing and a fare for transportation so they could leave the area.
돕지 않을 수 없죠. 그 모습 봐도 눈물 나는데 발이 막 얼어가지고 오고.
He asks, how can you not help someone who comes to you when they are so desperate, when their feet are frozen and they have no food and they have that level of desperation and starvation? He said it brought tears to his eyes. We'd already met a broker who arranged escapes to South Korea and a pastor who helped with the practicalities. But we wanted to know what the journey was like for those taking it. In one of the poorest areas of town, we found this 71-year-old woman living alone. This old lady is in hiding and she's asked us to speak very quietly because we're in essentially a block of flats and these walls are not very thick and her neighbours could hear us. Sun Yi has escaped and been sent back to North Korea 3 times. Each time she survived the punishment of hard labour camps. What has happened to your family? She said that 2 of her 5 children had come across the border with her, but both her son and daughter had been arrested trying to flee to South Korea and been deported.
7년 어간이 다 죽지.
The old lady began to cry as she spoke of her son.
당장
She fears for the worst for him, that he's been imprisoned for 7 years in a political prisoner camp, and she feels that people who go in there very rarely come out, they usually starve to death. She has no idea what has happened to them.
이거 딸이 두고간 가봐니까.
As we were leaving, Sun Yi produced a wallet. Her daughter gave her this purse as a memory, and it's got a picture of her daughter. It's the last photo taken of her before she was arrested and sent back to North Korea. The Dandong Railway Bridge is the main official link between China and North Korea.
You can just see North Korea now, it's just coming into view.
China views her communist neighbour as an ally. It considers all North Korean escapees as illegal economic migrants and looks to arrest and repatriate them. Once returned, they face imprisonment, sometimes even execution, making their deportation in violation of the UN Convention on Refugees that China is a signatory to. A committee that works with the Chinese government has recently suggested it reclassifies the status of North Korean nationals living in China. Before we left China, we'd heard of a North Korean woman who was preparing to leave on a journey to South Korea. Kun Sun said she had fled to China in 2007 and had been living in hiding ever since.
네, 거간에 아들을 다 주겠단 말입니다. 혼자 애 나갔고 아들이 병 다 나갔고 뭐.
She said that the reason she had to leave North Korea was because her 2 sons had died from malnutrition and a lack of medical care. She buried their bodies close to her home and she couldn't bear living there anymore. So she felt that she had to leave the area and come to China. Since arriving here, she has survived by making rice cakes.
50전 2개 일은 하루에 저게 양.
She said she can make 200 of them a day, earning her only about £10. But the broker is asking for 25,000 kwai, that's £2,500. At the moment she's only got £200 saved up, so she's going to have to make a lot of rice cakes.
난 기본 우리 나은애로 위해서 내가 한단 말입니다.
She says she's incredibly sad to be leaving because she's met a man in China who she loves. And whilst she wishes she didn't have to leave him, she feels she has no other option but to make the journey to South Korea. When she gets there, she hopes she can make enough money to be able to pay for him to join her. From what we'd been hearing, Kun Sun's chances of success seem very slim indeed.